My dad wanted to be the perfect stepfather for his stepdaughter, so he tampered with my food on my birthday to teach me a lesson. +4 updates. My dad wanted to be the perfect stepfather for his stepdaughter, so he tampered with my food on my birthday to teach me a lesson. But now my stepmom and mom have seen the video, and things are getting messy for him. My dad has never been the kind of man who gets along well with other men, if you know what I mean. He never hid his disappointment about giving birth to me. He openly admitted to everyone, even in my presence, that he had always wanted a baby girl. The fact that he ended up with a son seemed to him like some sort of unfortunate twist of fate. He would tell his friends how he was stuck with me forever, which was incredibly painful to hear. It felt like a rejection of my very existence, a dismissal of who I was simply because of my gender. From an early age, I also noticed a stark difference in how my dad treated me compared to all my cousins. While he would often shower them with praise and affection whenever we saw them, I always received a colder and more critical attitude from him. He would also scold me if I acted too masculine, according to him. He banned me from buying anything blue because he felt it was too boyish and insisted I stop acting like other boys. I was also forbidden from wearing pants or shorts. He dressed me like a girl for a long time and only allowed me to play with dolls and tea sets. I wasn't even allowed to have short hair because he thought it was too difficult to manage, and he always made me grow it very long. Honestly, I never understood his obsession with gender. Why did it matter so much if I was a girl or a boy? Why couldn't he see beyond that and appreciate me for who I was? As a child, these thoughts swirled in my head. I began to question my worth and whether I could ever meet his expectations. As if that wasn't enough, he also had a particular disdain for other men in our lives, which led to constant criticism and gossip about them. If one of my dad's co-workers ever got promoted, he would complain to my mom and me, insinuating that the man must have slept with someone to get the promotion. That was his default assumption, his immediate explanation for any man's success in the workplace. The idea that a man could achieve something through hard work and merit seemed foreign to him. It was as if, in his eyes, men could only advance by compromising their integrity. If one of my classmates received more appreciation from a teacher, my dad would quickly jump to the conclusion that the child's father must have had an affair with the teacher. And that's why the child was getting extra points. Not only was all of this strange for me to hear as a child, but his negative attitude was a constant presence in my life, shaping much of my childhood and how I saw myself and others. As you can imagine, my dad's comments made it difficult for me to form healthy relationships with other men. His constant attacks on other men created an atmosphere where I felt it was almost wrong to admire or be close to any man in my life. He made me believe that men were always competing with each other. If I ever befriended a boy, my dad would constantly remind me that it was better to be friends with girls, and that girls were always more helpful. For this reason, for a long time, I only had female friends in school because I was scared to befriend a boy and have him betray me. As if all these things weren't enough, when I was in high school, my mom confessed to my dad that she wanted a divorce. This was quite unexpected because I always thought my parents were fine. However, it turned out that she had been having an affair with one of her co-workers. Devastated and furious, my dad packed our things and took me to live in a motel. What followed next was an ugly divorce battle between the two of them. My dad's anger toward my mom was intense and all-consuming. He constantly used me as a pawn in his battle against her. I became a tool for him to get back at her, to inflict pain and assert his dominance. Every time I expressed a desire to spend time with my mom during their separation, he would get enraged with me. He would scream and yell, accusing me of choosing her over him, the woman who had betrayed us. She cheated on us, he would shout. You shouldn't even be in contact with her. The idea that I might want or need a relationship with my mom was incomprehensible to him. In his eyes, maintaining any connection with her was a direct betrayal of him and everything he had been through. Whenever I tried to tell him that I needed both parents and couldn't just cut my mom out of my life, his response was filled with venom. He accused me of trying to stab him in the back, of being disloyal. You should be ashamed of yourself. You're just like all the other men, he would say. I tried my best to understand his perspective, but I missed my mom terribly. She had always been a good mother to me, regardless of her relationship with my dad. When my mom and I met, unlike my dad, she never said a word against him. When she found out that my dad had told me about her affair, she immediately apologized and took full responsibility for her actions. She explained that she had been deeply unhappy in her marriage, and that falling in love with her coworker had been unexpected. Despite this, she emphasized several times that cheating on my dad was a grave mistake and assured me that when I grew up, she would be open to answering any questions I might have about what happened. Navigating my parents' divorce as an only child was one of the hardest challenges of my life. It forced me to grow up quickly, but also taught me that my parents, like anyone else, were human and prone to making mistakes. Since the divorce, my mom has remained a constant presence in my life, ensuring she fulfills her responsibilities. She has consistently paid child support to my dad, showing her commitment to providing for me despite their separation. She also allowed my dad and me to continue living in our family home even though she moved out. The condition was that I would live with my dad in the house to ensure stability in my life. She didn't want my dad and me to go through the ordeal of packing up all our things and moving to an entirely new neighborhood. Primarily, I live with my dad, but spend every other weekend with my mom. This arrangement allows me to maintain a relationship with both parents. However, I have to admit that since the divorce, my dad has become worse as a parent. He's extremely obsessed with remarrying before my mom does. I think his ego was deeply wounded by the fact that my mom cheated on him. After their separation was finalized, he started going out more frequently to bars and clubs, eager to meet new people and perhaps find a new partner quickly. This led him to meet Diana just 3 months after the divorce. Diana is a DJ and a single mother to a daughter, Michelle. Diana and her ex-husband had Michelle when they were quite young, and after he left them, Diana took full responsibility for raising her daughter. Michelle is 3 years younger than me and seems pretty well behaved. Diana also seems like a good person. However, the real problem began when I started noticing my dad's behavior around Michelle. As you know, my dad always wanted a daughter, a dream that never came true for him. So when Diana and Michelle came into our lives, my dad seemed quite thrilled at the prospect of potentially having Michelle as a daughter. He constantly went shopping with her, buying her new shoes or shirts, and proudly told all his friends how great Michelle was at school or how proud he was of her. At first, I thought maybe I was just jealous. But it became even clearer that something was wrong when even my mom started noticing the same thing. My dad would constantly call my mom to ask if I could spend more days with her because he wanted to go on road trips with his girlfriend and her daughter instead of staying home with me. If Diana had a gig somewhere, my dad would tag along. I tried not to worry too much about his change in behavior since I was always happy to spend more time with my mom. One day, things came to a head when my dad returned home from one of his road trips and informed me that he and Diana had gotten engaged. This was unexpected and way too soon, considering they had only been dating for a few months. I wanted to question him, but knew that if I said anything negative, he would take it as me not supporting him. So I just stayed quiet, and instead told him how happy I was for him. My dad then informed me that he had decided Diana and Michelle would move in with us. I was shocked by this announcement, especially because the house didn't even belong to him in the first place. It was my mom's house, and she had allowed us to continue living there after the divorce. As expected, when mom found out about his plans, she was furious. She bluntly told him that if he wanted Diana and Michelle to move in, then Diana would have to pay her rent every month. She wasn't going to let someone else live in her house for free. My dad didn't take it well. He argued with mom, accusing her of being jealous and trying to sabotage his relationship because he was finally happy with someone else. He was convinced her refusal to let Diana move in rent-free was a deliberate attempt to ruin things for him, but mom stood her ground. She reminded him that the house belonged to her and that she had only allowed him to stay there for my sake. She made it clear that if he thought she was being a pain, then he would also have to start paying rent or move out. The whole situation escalated, but in the end, Diana stepped in and agreed to pay rent to my mom. She and her daughter then moved into our house. At first, Diana moved into the master bedroom with my dad, while Michelle took over the guest room. Everything seemed to settle into a new routine, and Michelle and I played a lot of video games together. I was happy to finally have a stepsister, having been an only child for so long, but it didn't take long before Michelle started complaining about the bed in the guest room. Her room had an old bed, and understandably, it affected her sleep. Diana promised her they'd buy a new one soon. However, one afternoon, I came home to find that my bed had been moved into Michelle's room while the bed from the guest room had been placed in mine. I asked my dad why this had happened. He casually brushed it off, saying Michelle deserved a good bed to sleep on and that it wasn't a big deal. I argued with him that Diana could have bought her a bed just as she had promised. He shrugged and replied that I was older than Michelle, so I should learn to make sacrifices for the sake of their new life. After this incident, it slowly became painfully clear to me that my dad was clearly favoring Michelle over me, treating her with a level of care and attention that wasn't normal. For example, during dinner, she was allowed to take second servings without question. But if I tried to take more, he would slap my hand and harshly tell me not to be a fat pig. The irony was that I wasn't even overweight. I was athletic, active, and had a healthy appetite, but he insisted that Michelle, being a growing girl, deserved the extra food more than I did. Then there was the time my mom told me she had tickets to a baseball game and wanted to take me. I was excited and couldn't wait to go. But when I told my dad, he immediately insisted that I should let Michelle go instead. His reasoning? Because she was a girl and would enjoy it more. Obviously, my mom refused to take Michelle in my place, and I went as originally planned. The game was great, and I was happy to spend that time with my mom. On multiple occasions, my dad would plan day trips with just Diana and Michelle, deliberately excluding me from their plans. If Michelle ever invited me to join, he would insist that it was just the three of them who needed to bond as a family, and that I, being older, should sit this one out. It was as if he was creating a new family that didn't fully include me. The exclusion was painful, making me feel like an outsider in my own home, as if I was being pushed out. When my 18th birthday was approaching this year, my mom informed my dad that she wanted to throw me a big party to celebrate both my milestone birthday and my high school graduation. Since our family home was spacious enough and had a large backyard, she planned to hire a catering service and have everything set up there. My dad wouldn't have to lift a finger since she was handling all the arrangements. However, as expected, my dad tried to oppose it. He argued that hosting such a big event for me was unnecessary and that we could just have a family dinner at a restaurant instead. My mom argued that being her only son, she wanted to celebrate such an important milestone in my life with the rest of our family and friends. Although I agreed with my mom's idea, my dad wasn't willing to let it go so easily. He then argued that throwing such a big celebration for me would be a slap in the face to Diana, as she could never afford to do something similar for Michelle when she eventually graduated. He claimed it was unfair to make Michelle feel excluded by hosting an event that was all about me. He then suggested that maybe we could celebrate Michelle during the party as well. This was supposed to be my special day, a milestone, and yet my dad was more concerned about how it might affect Michelle and Diana. My mom, however, had had enough of his arguments. She firmly reminded him that Michelle wasn't her concern and that this party was for me, her son, who deserved to be celebrated. She made it clear that she was going to host this party whether he liked it or not, and if his new family didn't like it, then they were all uninvited. And that was the end of the discussion. This made my dad immediately backtrack on his statements and reluctantly agree to let me celebrate. Then when it came time to plan the party, my dad continued to interfere with everything. He started dictating how things should be done, saying that since Diana preferred vegan food, we needed to have more vegan options at my party. Now, this was going to be a complete waste of money since I knew no one else was vegan. But I didn't want to argue with him, so I agreed. Later, since I love eating fish, I wanted to order a fish dish, but my dad informed me that Michelle didn't like fish, so I shouldn't order any fish dishes. I tried to stay calm and firmly told him that this was my party, and I wanted to order the food I liked. If he, Diana, and Michelle had any problems with something I was going to order, then they could abstain just for one night. My response enraged him, and he yelled at me, accusing me of disrespecting his family and calling me a spoiled brat. He continued claiming that my mom's money was going to my head, and that I needed to learn to care about his wife and daughter too. He shook his head, wagging a finger in my face, and said, "I should teach you a lesson for acting so conceited." He then insisted that if I didn't consider what Diana and Michelle liked while planning the party, he would punish me and take away my phone as a consequence. At that moment, I saw red. I realized I was turning 18 and no longer had anything to lose. I was moving out soon anyway, so I decided to finally let out all the years of pent-up anger. I yelled at him saying I'd always considered Michelle and Diana's needs, but this was my party, my last celebration before moving out, and I deserved the freedom to make my own decisions. I told him I'd kept my mouth shut for long enough and that if he took away my phone or punished me without reason, I would call Child Protective Services for mentally and emotionally torturing me all these years. It was obviously a lie, but I wanted him to think twice before mistreating me again. His eyes widened in shock when he heard me say this. He knew an investigation could impact his relationship with Diana and Michelle, who was still a minor. I then continued to tell him that if he no longer saw me as his son, I would cut all contact with him when I went to college. I didn't want a father who never prioritized me, always put others before me, and made me feel like I was second best in my own home. It was a moment of raw, unfiltered honesty, and I made it clear I was done being pushed aside. He then started insisting I was overreacting and that all he ever wanted was for me to treat Diana and Michelle as I treated other family members. After this argument, he avoided giving me his opinions on the party as much as he could. When the party arrived, I was excited to celebrate with my family and friends. Diana had offered to DJ the event, and it was great. Meanwhile, my mom was busy chatting with some relatives, proudly boasting about the college I was about to attend. However, the one person who stood out as the odd one out was my dad. He was in the kitchen, sipping his margarita and clearly avoiding mingling with the rest of us. His disinterest and detachment were palpable, and it was hard not to notice how distant he was from the celebration. Even Diana noticed how aloof he was and went to talk to him, trying to convince him to enjoy the day like the rest of us. When it was time to serve the food, I watched as my dad carefully prepared plates for Diana and Michelle. He seemed to take special care to ensure they had everything they liked. I wanted to let the other guests serve themselves first, so I hung back waiting for my turn. Suddenly, out of nowhere, my dad came up to me with a plate of food. I looked at him curiously, not knowing what to make of this unexpected gesture. He handed me the plate and wished me a happy birthday. I was baffled and asked him what he was doing, especially since he had never in all the years I could remember, served me a plate of food before. He just shrugged and said he wanted to do this for me since I was now 18. It was hard to admit, but in that moment, I felt a warm comforting sensation in my stomach. Despite everything, there was something comforting about him taking care of me. Even if it was just with something as simple as serving me a plate of food. For a brief moment, I felt like he was trying to build a bridge over the gap that had grown between us. However, as soon as I took a bite of the fish on my plate, I had to spit it out. My mouth was overwhelmed by a salty taste and I started coughing uncontrollably. The guests around me turned to look, and a few of my cousins quickly offered me water, trying to help me calm down. I looked at my plate, confused, and asked if they found the fish too salty. Perplexed, they shook their heads, confused. Growing more suspicious, I checked my plate again and then looked at my dad. Our eyes met, and I noticed he had a smug smile on his face. It took me a moment to realize he was holding an empty salt shaker in his hand, waving it around as if to indicate he had deliberately added too much salt to my fish. Suddenly, I realized he had tampered with my food. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice tense. "Did you really put salt on my fish? Why would you do something like this?" He looked at me, still smiling smugly as if it was all just a mean joke. In a cold tone, he told me he had warned me not to order fish, but I had insisted. So this was his way of teaching me a lesson for being so conceited. He insisted it was just a harmless joke anyway, but that it would teach me never to argue with him in the future. I told him how horrible he was as a father for even thinking of doing something like that. My dad simply laughed dismissively as he walked away, as if I didn't matter. With cameras installed around the house, I knew I had a way to expose him. After the party, I decided to download the footage from the backyard security camera. The footage clearly showed my dad adding salt to my plate before walking over to me and handing it to me. Even as I write this, the thought of what he did makes my blood boil. I'm planning to share the footage with Diana and Michelle when I move out of the house soon. I wish I could confront him or expose his behavior right now, but I'm going to keep my mouth shut and wait for the right moment once I'm far away from him. So am I the bad one if I expose my dad to everyone? Update 1. It's been a month and a half since my last update. I've finally moved out of the house. My mom helped me carry all my boxes to my dorm, and the rest of my things are at her house for now. I still haven't told my mom what happened with my dad because I know she'll be furious, and I'm worried it could lead to a big confrontation. Now that I'm out of the house, I'm ready to go ahead with my plan to expose my dad as he can't hurt me anymore. I believe Diana and Michelle deserve to know the truth about my dad, even if it may be hard for them. For everyone asking, I'm sure Diana has probably noticed how my dad treats me differently from how he treats her daughter, but she's never interfered. Anyway, I don't blame her for any of this, and my focus is solely on my dad, who is responsible for everything that's happened. I know she could have said something about it, but she isn't my mom and wasn't responsible for me. That was my dad's job. Update 2. I read everyone's advice. And this morning, I decided to create a group chat with Diana, Michelle, and my mom. I wrote a detailed message explaining how I had been treated differently from Michelle over the years, making sure to emphasize that Michelle wasn't at fault for any of it. Then, I described the incident that happened on my birthday, where my own dad sabotaged my food by adding an entire bottle of salt to it and served it to me out of spite. I told them how I had grown tired of my father's abusive behavior toward me over the years. And to back up my story, I sent the video as evidence. At the end of my message, I asked Diana if she would ever truly feel comfortable having her daughter around such a vile man who had no shame in treating his own son this way. This happened just a few minutes ago, and I'm still waiting for them to read and respond. Update 3. Now that I've received some responses, I can provide an update. I was waiting for both Diana and my mom to reply so I wouldn't have to post separate updates. First, my mom called to confirm if everything I said was true and asked why I had never shared all this in detail with her before. I broke down and explained that I sometimes struggle to open up. She apologized to me repeatedly and then told me she had spent the morning yelling at my father. She also mentioned that she's giving him a 1-month notice to move out. She said she had been considering it for a while but was hesitant. However, now that she knows how he's been treating me all these years, she has no sympathy left for him and wants to reclaim her home. Later, Diana also reached out and told me she had no idea my father hated me this much. She always thought it was just typical father-son issues, so she stayed out of it over the years. But after seeing the video, she really understood how disturbed he was. When she confronted my father about it, he, as usual, started blaming me for everything. This led to a big fight between them, and she decided to take some distance from him. She even told me that she's postponing their wedding, which was supposed to happen this year, although it's been delayed multiple times already. Michelle and I also talked, and we're okay. As for my father, he hasn't stopped calling and messaging me. His messages range from insults to threats for exposing him, but I no longer care. I've decided to completely ignore him and avoid any interaction with him for now. In the end, I don't regret exposing my father, and I hope he learns never to mess with me again. Update 4. It's been several months since my last update, and I feel like I can finally breathe a sigh of relief. Although not everything is perfect, I can confidently say my life has improved significantly. To start, Diana finally decided to leave my father. A few weeks ago, she called and asked if we could meet to talk. I was a little nervous but agreed. We met at a coffee shop near my university, and it was a conversation I'll never forget. Diana began by apologizing profusely. She said she felt terribly guilty for not stepping in sooner and for not noticing the severity of the situation. She explained that she had always felt like something was off with my father, but could never pinpoint exactly what it was. You know, she said, your dad and I got engaged a long time ago, but there was always something holding me back from taking the next step. Now I understand it was his personality that made me hesitate, she continued. Your dad always acted differently when he was with me. He seemed loving, understanding, and supposedly concerned about you. He constantly told me you couldn't spend time with us because you were with your mom. But deep down, he wished we could be a united family. There was always something that didn't sit right with me, Diana said. I wanted to talk to you about it, but at the same time, I didn't want to meddle in the relationship between a father and his son. Now I realize I should have. And I'm so sorry for not helping you all this time. I told Diana I appreciated her honesty and understood her position. It wasn't easy for her to step into such a complicated family dynamic. Diana told me that after seeing the video and hearing my side of the story, she had a long conversation with my father. As expected, he tried to justify his actions and blamed me for misinterpreting things. But this time, Diana didn't fall for his manipulations. I told him there's no way to misinterpret what I saw in that video, she explained. The way he treated you, how he sabotaged your food on your own birthday, that's not paternal love. It's pure cruelty. She said my father tried to downplay the incident, claiming it was just a harmless joke and that I was overreacting. But Diana stood firm. I told him that if he was capable of doing something like that to his own son, how could I be sure he wouldn't do the same to Michelle in the future? That was the final straw, Diana said. I realized I couldn't build a life with someone capable of being so cruel to his own child. What kind of example would that set for Michelle? Diana informed me that she had decided to end her relationship with my father for good. Not only did she cancel the wedding, but she also told him she didn't want anything more to do with him. She assured me that this decision wouldn't affect my relationship with Michelle, and that I'd always be welcome in her life if I wanted to be. On the other hand, my mom has been incredibly supportive throughout this whole process. After finding out everything that had happened, she took immediate action. As I mentioned before, she gave my father a month to move out of the house and followed through on her word. My mom explained to me that the house had always been hers because she owned it before marrying my father. After the divorce, she had allowed him to continue living there, mainly for my sake, so I would have a stable and comfortable place to live. She also admitted that part of the decision stemmed from guilt over her infidelity, which was the initial cause of the divorce. But now, my mom told me, there's no reason for him to stay there anymore. And after how he's treated you, I can't let him continue living in my property. My father tried to fight this decision, arguing that he had the right to stay in the house after so many years of marriage. He even threatened to take the matter to court. However, my mom had consulted her lawyer and had all the documents in order to prove the house was exclusively hers. Finally, a few months ago, my father moved out. I don't know exactly where he went, and, frankly, I don't really care. What I do know is that he's no longer in the place I once considered my home, and that brings me a peace I can't put into words. As for my relationship with my father, I'm sure he's not happy about all of this. But since he's blocked, it's not like he can call me to say anything. Regarding Michelle, after everything that happened, we had a long talk. I explained to her that I never blamed her for the preferential treatment she received from my father and that I understood she had no control over the situation. Michelle confessed that she sometimes felt uncomfortable with how my father treated me, but didn't know how to address the issue. As for my mom, our relationship has grown even stronger. She has apologized countless times for not noticing sooner what was happening and is making a conscious effort to be more present in my life. We talk on the phone almost every day, and she visits me at campus at least once a month. It feels good to leave my father and his toxicity behind. And before anyone says it, I'd say the same thing about toxicity directed toward a woman. People are good or bad regardless of their gender. What's not okay is generalizing because of one negative experience with someone.